our experiences can be different, but we can still have very rich and fulfilling experiences. And, I think for my journey, and I know other people with disabilities that I've talked with would say the same thing, that in some ways the disability has enriched our experience and our stories. In my case, it's definitely something that has enriched my overall story.
Hey folks, welcome to Adventure Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Mason Gravely. Before we get into today's episode, which is actually from Without Compromise, my other show, but I just wanted to share it because it has to do with our Two for the Trail program at Athletic Brewing. If you don't know, that's my day job, working with Athletic Brewing. We make non-alcoholic craft beer, and 2% of all of our sales get donated to park and trail cleanups, which is awesome because, half the stories from this show come from national parks and different outdoor recreation areas, really. And so 2% of all our sales go to those places. And this year we are setting aside, we already know that we're going to get at least $500,000 for that program. And we're going to do a grant with it. So if you know of an organization out there in the U.S. or in Canada that could use some money for a project they're doing, something that's trail-based, something that's outdoor access-based, please have them go to athleticbrewing.com and apply. We're giving away $500,000 between essentially now and June, with more money coming at the end of the year. So please send them there. It's called our Two for the Trails program. And speaking of Athletic Brewing, I was able to go to my very first Spartan race this weekend. It's an obstacle course race, if you've ever heard of Spartan. Huge thing. And the first one this year was in Jacksonville, not terribly far away, so I decided to go up and help hand out beer to people crossing the finish line. And so many people were like, oh my gosh, Athletic Brewing, I heard about this on Adventure Sports Podcast. How cool is that? It was so cool to meet y'all out there and see some of the community. You forget sometimes when you're talking to yourself in your closet with just a computer screen that's lighting the closet up. You forget that people actually listen to this. And so it was cool to see just some folks out there who are fans of the show. So y'all know who you are. And just trying to connect all the dots. But anyway, this story, Wesley's story, which is the subject of today's episode, is Wesley works for American Hiking Society. He's one of the partners with us through our Two for the Trail program at Athletic Brewing. I know I'm throwing like a lot of different things at you, but that's kind of how all these dots are connected. But Wesley's incredible. He has thru-hiked the Pacific Crest Trail. He has climbed all of Colorado's 14ers. And the biggest challenge of all, in a lot of ways, is the fact that he has cerebral palsy. And obviously, he doesn't let that stop him from doing some pretty incredible things. So we're going to hear his story, and I really encourage you to check out his short film. It's about 13 minutes long. There's a link in the show notes. It just helps you visualize what the experience was like, and he tells it in a really, really beautiful way. And obviously, there's a pretty crazy thing that happens in his story that we'll get into. But he talks about that as well in the film. So please go check out his website, follow American Hiking Society, follow Athletic Brewing, and just an amazing story all around from Wesley. So thanks, Wesley, for being on the show. And without further ado, here he is.
Doing well. Thanks for having me, Mason. I appreciate it.
Yeah, definitely. I always ask this first. Where are you coming from today?
Yeah, so that's a great question. Right now, I am on the Front Range of Colorado in a small town called Florissant.
Florissant. All right. Yeah, I'm familiar with that. Used to be. That's awesome, man. So, just tell us a little bit about, where you grew up. You're a native to Colorado, right?
Yeah, I grew up in Colorado. My mom's side of the family has been around for several generations. I grew up in the small town of Woodland Park, not too far from where I currently live. And kind of through that experience, I had lots of access to the outdoors. So I felt very privileged to be able to have some amazing trails and mountains within short drives of where I grew up.
These mountains, these amazing places are kind of your backyard. Did they feel like something that was, accessible as a kid? Because I lived in Denver for a while, and there was those kind of those folks in town, in the city, that didn't get out there much. I mean, my wife's an elementary school teacher, and like half the kids don't ever go to the mountains. What was your family like?
Yeah, so I grew up in a family that was very outdoorsy. In fact, I like to tell the story that my parents carried me up my first 14,000-foot peak when I was just a toddler. They carried me up to the top of Mount Yale, and I, like to consider that my very first adventure above tree line, and kind of set the trajectory for the rest of my life.
Oh my gosh! So you came from an adventurous family. I mean, I'm sure you don't remember that experience because you were so young, but that obviously made an impact on you. That's really cool.
Yeah, I definitely don't remember it. I've only seen a handful of old film photos of kind of that trip, so don't remember that. But then, just spending summers in the mountains a lot of times, and when I was in when I was 9, my parents and my sister and I climbed our first 14er as a family, which was Mount Princeton, which was a very incredible experience, especially for me. So a little bit of my backstory. I was born with a mild form of cerebral palsy that kind of limits my fine motor control and just coordination on the right half of my body. And so making it to the top of Mount Princeton, and that experience, I think, was a really empowering experience that has kind of, in many ways, also kind of set the trajectory for where I've gone in life.
So your cerebral palsy was evident pretty early on. Like it was, I know it's mild, like you said, but it was showing itself, and you had to deal with it from the beginning. And so climbing absolutely. That mountain so young was like a huge boost for you, I'm sure.
Yeah. I mean, growing up, trying to do like the typical like physical activities, like even small things like learning to tie my shoes, playing sports in PE, or doing, like t-ball or any type of recreation sports, like those things were always a challenge for me. And Mount Princeton was definitely a challenge. But it was something that I could do, and kind of felt like I wasn't around a lot of kids, so I didn't feel like I was being judged. Or I'm not saying that kids a lot of times judged me per se, but just when people are like looking at you, and you just know that they know that that you're different, and so kind of being in the backcountry away from other kids or just other people in general was a relief, and kind of allowed me to kind of find who I am as an individual.
It was that time in nature, man. That is powerful stuff. So you climbed that first mountain. You felt super empowered, realized what you could do. How did it grow from there? Were you, hooked in the outdoors? Were you doing other things? What was the trajectory that you were talking about earlier?
Yeah. So a number of years, there was a couple of years between my first 14er and the second group of 14ers that I climbed when I was a little bit older, 2 years older. And that experience, getting above tree line, I kind of got into this groove that I had never experienced before, of kind of feeling like I was doing really well at something that I didn't anticipate feeling comfortable with. And yeah, so, I would say at age 11, realizing that I felt kind of like my fullest potential when I was above tree line, which was kind of an interesting experience to have. And so, from there, it was just a matter of, my family or my dad and I, setting out on different 14er adventures for from year to year, mostly climbing just obviously in the summertime. And then it was in kind of my high school years, sometime in the high school years, I kind of realized that I wanted to set like the goal of climbing there's 54 or 58 14ers, depending on who you ask, in Colorado. And so I kind of set that goal sometime when I was in high school. I don't have a specific date for when I decided I wanted to do it. And so started to just kind of continue to work on summiting these different 14,000 foot peaks, which became a major part of my story. Along the way, after graduating high school, my dad and I were coming down off of a relatively challenging peak called Keystone Needle. And we were coming down and we came across a trail crew that was working on on kind of the lower section of the trail. And we started talking with them and realized that they were college-age students out doing trail work for the summer. And that interaction was also a key experience in my life, of having that conversation and realizing that regular people could do trail work. Because before that, I'd never thought too much. I assumed that, the government, paid people to go out and make trails, and I had never really thought too much about it. But seeing those kind of younger kids, I mean, they were older than I was at the time, doing that trail work really inspired me. So when I went to college, I applied to work for a trail crew with Rocky Mountain Youth Corps. I wasn't sure like how that experience would turn out. I wasn't even sure that RMYC would give me a call back, because with someone with cerebral palsy, trying to do physical labor in kind of high alpine conditions isn't something that most people think of. But luckily they hired me, and I was thrilled about the experience. And so I went back all 4 years during school to do trail work across the Rocky Mountains.
So giving back to the trails was an early passion for you. Now you do it for a career. Yeah. So those experiences, what did that start leading you into doing that trail work over the summer?
Yeah, so I think it really opened my eye to just doing conservation work as a whole, which definitely led me, to where I am at now with American Hiking Society, which I'm sure we'll get into a little bit. But also, so kind of that experience, I realized, of giving back to trails and building things that would last longer than my lifetime, and really kind of understanding that legacy of kind of leaving the places I love better than they were when I was there, was something that became a passion for me, and is something that I'm really excited about right now. There's more than 48 million people in the U.S. that go out for hikes each year, and yet only a small fraction of those people do trail service. And so I'm really passionate about sharing my story to get people to consider, giving back to the trails and the wild places that they love to recreate in.
So that's something we talk about a lot here at Athletic is making it better, take care of these places that we enjoy. But I'd love to ask you about your the 54 14ers that you climbed. When did it become apparent to you that you wanted to do them all? If you don't mind me asking about this, by the way, I'd love to talk about that story of doing them all.
Yeah. So yeah, it was literally almost a 2-decade project. If you consider when I first started climbing 14ers when I was 9, so it took almost 2 decades to complete the project. It wasn't until high school that I realized that I wanted to take on the whole list, partly because I knew there were a few difficult peaks. And for those people who don't know, of the 54 14ers, about 2/3 of them are mostly just hiking trails. In kind of the mountaineering world and climbing world, there's a classification system that goes from 1 to 5. So 1 is just simple, like hiking on trails, and then class 5 is like technical, like vertical climbing. And so about 2/3 of the 14ers kind of fall in the class 1 and 2 categories. And then there's, that other third that are class 3 and 4, which require more scrambling. You're using all four. You're on all four for different times. Really have to kind of be careful monitoring the risk of falling and things along those lines. So it wasn't until like high school timeframe that I began to get into a few of the more difficult ones to realize that like I felt comfortable enough, though it was a very slow process to kind of build up enough experience to feel comfortable in, for me, especially with kind of my lack of coordination and lack of strength on the right side of my body. Building that confidence took a lot of time. So in high school, I was able to do a couple of the class 3 peaks and realized, okay, I think I have what it takes, as long as I take it slow and try to mitigate the inherent risks of mountaineering with cerebral palsy, and kind of began focusing on climbing the 14ers. So every summer, my dad and I would plan to climb a few, and there'd be a few years that I wouldn't get to any because I was doing other trips or other adventures. So I took a few years off to do some long distance hiking. And so, that added to just the overall length of the project, taking more time since I wasn't, some people are really dedicated to like knocking off, some people do all 54 in just one summer, or shorter periods of time. But for me, it was just kind of, like I would do them when I could. And I really enjoyed doing most of them with my father in most cases, as well. So yeah, that was kind of what the overall project looked like for me.
You're being a little modest. You took off a few years to do some long distance hiking. You hiked the Pacific Crest Trail. I don't want to go too far on a tangent, but that's an experience of a lifetime for a lot of people. That is like an enormous achievement in most people's lives, and I know it is for you as well. But that's not even. That's just a fraction of some of the things you've accomplished. That had to be just such an incredible experience. Were you apprehensive at all with having cerebral palsy going into a multi-thousand-mile through hike?
Great question. Yes. So the summer before I did the PCT, I through hiked the Colorado Trail, which is about a little bit less than 500 miles here in Colorado. And so that I would say was getting my feet wet for long distance hiking. And the Colorado Trail was an amazing experience. I felt really prepared for it and just had an incredible hike. And so the following year, due to some like unforeseen circumstances, like some like grad school kind of fell through and I wasn't sure what I was kind of doing for the next couple of years. So I decided that I would attempt to do the Pacific Crest Trail the following summer. And I felt like after doing the Colorado Trail that I had, some idea what I was doing when it came to long distance through hiking. But it became apparent very quickly on the PCT that I wasn't sure I was even going to be able to finish the PCT. It was kind of funny on the Colorado Trail. I literally, for 500 miles, I had like no blisters, no problems with my feet or legs. But within 60 miles of starting the Pacific Crest Trail, I was a complete wreck. In fact, I had to take 2 or 3 days off the trail just because my right ankle and foot were giving me some issues. And so I was very close to having to abandon the project within 60 miles of the start in Southern California. Luckily, after taking some days off and kind of slowing my pace a little bit, I was able to keep going and still had a couple interesting moments in Southern California that I was still afraid. After about 350 miles, I had another issue with my right knee, again, the side with cerebral palsy that I thought might take me off trail. But luckily, again, I was able to kind of work through that and was able to complete the trail, which was, like you said, once in a lifetime type of opportunity for many people. And yeah, it was each day, it took me 139 days, not that anyone was counting. But each of those days, there was incredible joy and incredible beauty, but also moments of like trial and suffering, whether that's in the triple degree temperatures in Southern California and in Northern California, or some of the snowy passes in the high Sierras. I feel like the more I progressed on the trail, the more I felt confident, but also like realized like all the time things were changing and you kind of had to adapt. And throughout the entire trail, there was definitely moments that were pure joy, but then also moments that were kind of scary in terms of not knowing if I was going to be able to make it or whatnot. And so it was something that I hope I will never forget and fondly look back on.
Absolutely. Incredible achievement. I know there's a small or short documentary folks can watch about it. We're going to plug all that. And also your most recent documentary about finishing the 54 14ers. Do you want to tell that story about finishing and what that was like and getting to the last peak on the Maroon Bells?
Yeah. So in terms of the 14er project, I had basically, before I set off on the Pacific Crest Trail, I had done 50 of the 54 peaks that I was kind of going for. Yeah, I was almost done. And then I came back from the PCT hoping, in the next year or two that I would be able to tackle those last four 14ers. And just due to just the way life was going for me, I didn't have the opportunity for a couple of years to tackle a couple of them. And so I was able to knock out all of them but the last two, which were the Maroon Bells, which are two of the more technical and more difficult and dangerous 14ers. After a number of years of having bad, scheduling a trip and having bad weather, basically changed my plans with my dad. In 2016, my dad and I had several weeks blocked out on our calendar to make the climb. And my dad that summer was having some hip issues, and he let me know that he just wouldn't be able to safely do the bells, which kind of devastated me because I was really hoping to finish the 14ers with my father. I thought that would be a great way to finish it.
Totally.
And so I was hoping to, I thought about waiting another year and trying to do them with my father. But at the same time, since my dad's hip was kind of giving him problems, I wasn't sure if he would be up for it the following year either. There was no guarantee that he would want to do that, and so I decided to put out a request on a local climbing forum to see if anyone would be interested in doing the 14er with me. And there was a couple of people who expressed interest, and I talked to several of them on the phone and connected with a guy named Steve. And Steve had done all the 14ers, most of them multiple times. And he had led several trips with the Colorado Mountain Club up the Maroon Bells and had done the traverse. There's what's called the traverse between North Maroon and Maroon Peak. That is class 4, nearly technical traverse. In fact, I think some people even rank it as class 5 technical traverse that he had done twice before. So he had lots of experience, and I felt really comfortable connecting with him and setting out to do the 14ers with someone who had done them, because route finding on the Maroon Bells is tricky because it's very rotten rock and cairns kind of disappear and corrode, which are a wayfinding device on alpine terrain. And so I was just pretty excited to connect with Steve. And just a few days after we connected on the phone, we rendezvoused in near Aspen at a campground just outside from where the Maroon Bells were or are. And we set out the next morning to do Maroon Peak, which was an amazing experience. I had been up Maroon Peak once before. I had made it to 13,000 feet, a little over 13,000 feet with my dad a number of years before, but just had bad weather, and so we turned around. And so we made it to kind of the more technical section, and Steve and I were just in the zone. For those people who haven't been above tree line or kind of in a very class 3 or class 4 experience above tree line, it puts you in the moment. You can't really be thinking about the future or the past. You really have to focus on what you're doing, where you're putting your hands and feet, and making sure you're not knocking loose rocks down onto other climbers or whatnot. So we were definitely in the zone for most of that climb, and made it to the top of Maroon Peak, and discussed what we had discussed before about if we both felt that we were kind of at the peak of our ability or feeling really good about it, that we would consider doing the traverse. And so we had talked about it, and we decided to do the traverse, which is very committing, because like basically once you commit to the traverse, there's no turning back. It's kind of a one-way trip, so to speak, just because there's not places to escape from the route, because it is so technical and a lot of cliffs and loose terrain. So we committed to that.
Yeah. For those listening, it's like a knife edge between the two peaks that you have to get. It's like a bridge, but it's a very dangerous, narrow, rocky path from one peak to the other. And like you said, once you commit, it's impossible nearly to turn back.
Yeah. And so like that like thought definitely kind of turned my stomach a little bit, knowing I was going to be facing some of the most challenging terrain I had faced on my entire 14-year project. But I felt confident in my overall experience that I would be able to do it. And with Steve's ability to do route finding, I thought that it would be a great way, like it would be an amazing way to end the project, to do both the Bellas in a single day. And so we pushed on, and the traverse was, I felt like Steve definitely underplayed his description of the route that he'd done before, because it was definitely a lot of loose ledges and kind of scrambling up different cliff bands. And it took, the Maroon Bells are only about a quarter mile as the crow flies. But it took us, I think about more than 3 hours, I believe, to make that quarter mile trip, because of the terrain is just so steep. And the route finding is a challenge. You might go up a certain gully or across a rocky ledge and then get cliffed out, and then have to backtrack to find a route that was not technical. And so we made it to the top of North Maroon, which, as you can imagine, was pretty emotional for me to finish my 54 14er project on North Maroon. So we took some pictures, but then pretty quickly realized like we needed to start heading down, because we only had 3 or 4 hours of daylight left, and we wanted to be off the steep terrain before the sun went down. And so we started going down, and North Maroon is considered a class 4 climb. The peak we went up is class 3. So we went up a slightly easier section, and then we're going down a more difficult stretch. And so, we were taking our time going down these kind of loose gullies, and things were going well, and kind of looking forward to getting back down to just the regular trail. And we were getting close to the bottom of kind of the technical, or not technical climbs, but the scrambling sections. We had one last down climb to get back down to just where the regular trail was. Unfortunately, on that down climb, I went down this, it's a pretty short cliff section that I went down, and I was standing on, what a regular hiking trail basically at that point. And unfortunately, when Steve was coming down, he kind of lost his footing and tumbled down that section out of my sight. And at that point, I realized that the experience was quickly changing into kind of a traumatic experience, that this was no longer just a regular day in the mountains, that things progressed very quickly out of our control. at that point, once I realized I couldn't see Steve, I had a spot device, which for those people who don't know, it's a GPS transmitter that you can send preset messages to people. And so I was using that to let people know that we were doing okay. And I would send out signals when we got to each of the peaks. And then it also has an SOS capability that you can hit an SOS button that basically alerts search and rescue to let them know that you are in trouble. So I turned on the SOS of the GPS because I knew I didn't know where I didn't know where Steve was, but I knew like no matter what, that best case scenario, he would probably have like a sprained ankle or something that would still need to would need help to get out of that situation. I climbed down to Steve, and unfortunately, when I got to him, it was apparent that he had already passed away in the fall. And so after kind of getting my bearings and kind of assessing the situation, I realized it was going to be dark pretty soon. So I had to make the decision to hike out on my own, which was an incredibly the most challenging thing that I've ever experienced in life.
What was going through your mind then? Like, what were you? I can't even imagine.
Yeah, a lot of things, a lot of guilt and shame, and kind of just like darkness. As I got back to the trail, I kind of traversed back over to where the trail was, and by that time it was starting to get dusk and starting to get dark. And so, so that experience, like trying to not allow the guilt and shame to completely like crush me in that moment was a challenge. And I had to like just try not to, I had to not think too much about the situation, just because, it was almost like almost too much to handle in some ways. And so because of that, I had to kind of think about like my family and not allow kind of the negative thoughts about shame or guilt, like feeling like that it was like something that I did wrong that caused the situation. And so made my way out, and then ran into a couple of climbers on my way out that we had been on the mountain with for a while, which was a major relief to be with other people, to be able to like tell them what happened and explain the situation, and continue to hike out to basically meet up with the sheriff and search and rescue team. So the experience, after that, it took, there was a very traumatic experience that took months for me to like begin to like kind of wrestle with, and realize that it wasn't that no matter how things played out, that there was only so many things that I could control, and that Steve and I were both doing what we loved. And North Maroon, he agreed to climb with me because North Maroon was one of his favorite peaks, and so he died doing what he loved on one of his favorite mountains. And I think that and talking with his family and kind of beginning to cope with that took many months to wrestle through and to kind of allow some healing. And so I think through that process, learned a lot more about myself, and realizing how much I had to depend on others, like having support from my friends and family was absolutely critical to get through that. And so it was definitely a long process. And so part of why I wanted to tell my 14er story is also realizing that it's more than just my story in many facets. And so a year after Steve passed away, in fact, it was just a year and 6 days after the accident, my wife and I had our first child, or our only child at this point, which was an incredible experience. And shortly after Camille was born, we started going out on hikes just around where we lived at the time. And just spending time outside with the family was incredibly rewarding, to be able to share my love of the outdoors with my daughter, even though she didn't obviously understand or like know what we were doing all of the time. But that was incredible for me. And then thinking through it, talking to my wife and my parents about it, I realized my parents carried me up Mount Yale when I was just a toddler, basically. And so I decided that I wanted to do a 14er with Camille and my wife and parents. And so we made plans. I wanted to do Mount Yale because I thought that would be fitting to kind of bring the story back to where it all began. Unfortunately, the road up to Mount Princeton was closed that summer. So we decided to climb Huron Peak, which is another peak just a few miles south of Mount Yale. And it took a couple of attempts. We attempted it once as a family, and the conditions above tree line were just too windy for Camille the first time. And so we did it again. And thankfully, we were all able to get to the summit safely and sharing that with my parents and basically 3 generations of my family, being on top of a 14er was one of the best experiences of my life. So that after that experience, realized that I wanted to make a short film kind of about my 14er story, and kind of began that process of writing the story. And that took, many months, several years actually, to keep writing and rewriting the story to finally get to a place that I felt like I could talk about it and be okay with the story and to share that with people.
It's a powerful story and it's a great film. I've watched it a handful of times now, and just wild experience, man. What do you think the whole experience of doing all the 14ers and how it ended and how you've processed that? What has that taught you about life? What do you think the biggest lesson has been, or one of them?
Yeah, that's a great question, Mason. I feel like I've learned quite a bit about myself and just learning to cope and adapt to cerebral palsy. Sometimes, like when I'm up in the mountains, I feel like, sometimes I ask myself if it's foolish to be up there, like doing what I'm doing with cerebral palsy, because there is inherent risk with that. But for me, going back to that sense that I feel most alive when I'm above tree line is what kind of draws me to these experiences, but also realizing being okay with my weakness and with my disability, and embracing that, I think has been an interesting experience, because I feel like we live in a culture that is averse to weakness. We always want to talk about our strengths, and we always want to, we talk about pushing through to achieve things. But I think for me, the title of the video, Within Weakness, kind of encompasses, I feel like, the lesson that I want to share with people, that I think it's okay to like embrace our weakness, because I think I think there's an interesting dichotomy or a paradox, so to speak, between strength and weakness. That sometimes within weakness, I think we can find great strength that is within ourselves and external to us as individuals. And sometimes, same thing with strength. Sometimes when we live within our strengths, those strengths can easily kind of become hindrances or weaknesses. And so for me, it was kind of embracing that idea that it's okay if I don't always have what it takes, that I can find strength and I can find contentment with like who I am as an individual and my identity, and realizing that the outcomes of these accomplishments isn't based on, or my identity isn't confined to my disability, but it's also not defined by my accomplishments. And so I think just like living within that of finding the joy of being out there and kind of embracing kind of those weaknesses and that struggle, I think is something that I'm sure I'll continue to kind of work on and explore for the rest of my life. But it's something that I think people, I don't know, sometimes overlook, that sometimes we only want to put our best foot forward, and we only want people to see us in our best state. And yeah, I think that's the takeaway.
What do you think the biggest misconception folks have about cerebral palsy and living with it?
That's another great question, Mason. I think a lot of times, people tend to like look down on people with disabilities in certain ways. Maybe not in a like negative way. And even in myself, sometimes I'm like, I play like the what if game of like, oh, like what if I didn't have cerebral palsy? Like if I can do the 14ers with CP, like what would I be? Or the PCT with CP, what could I do without cerebral palsy? And I have to like kind of catch myself and not allow my mind to kind of play those what ifs, because I don't think it's always positive to do that for just my mental state. But I think the misconception is that there is like a lot of like opportunities that we miss or don't get to experience. And some of our experiences, people with disabilities, like our experiences can be different, but we can still have very rich and fulfilling experiences. And I think for my journey, and I know other people with disabilities that I've talked with would say the same thing, that in some ways the disability has enriched our experience and our stories. In my case, it's definitely something that has enriched my overall story.
Absolutely. And you can't play those what if games. I used to play basketball, and I'm tall. People always said, man, if I was tall as you, I'd be in the NBA. And I was like, well, if I was fast as you, I'd be in the NBA, because I'm tall and slow. You're short and fast. I mean, we all have our strengths and weaknesses. We can play the what if game to the nth degree if we want to. So it's futile. I think it's futile. But So before we jump into rapid fire, Wesley, I'd love to ask you just a little bit about, folks know about our 2 for the Trail program. They hear about it. They know that we do, we were doing cleanup events and trail work days. Obviously, 2020 happened. Tell us about, you're one of our partners at American Hiking Society. Tell us about what you do there and what American Hiking Society does. Then we'll get into rapid fire.
Sounds great. Yeah, so American Hiking Society has been around for more than 40 years at this point. And our mission is to empower all to enjoy, share, and preserve the hiking experience. How we work on achieving our mission kind of plays out in a variety of ways. One of those ways is through advocacy work. We're based in DC and have always been based in DC because we work with the federal land managers and Congress when it comes to public policy and legislation that affects hiking trails in public lands. So we're always on the Hill advocating for funding and for the preservation of public lands. So in addition to kind of the advocacy side of things, we also do a variety of stewardship work. We have a variety of stewardship trail service programs, including volunteer vacations and alternative breaks, which are week-long trail service trips that take place all across the country. In most years, last year due to COVID and this year with COVID, we're somewhat limited in where we can go and what we can do this year. But in normal years, we'll do trips everywhere from Alaska to the Virgin Islands and do those with college students for our alternative break program, and then with mostly adults in the volunteer vacations program, as well as our flagship program of National Trails Day, which takes place every year on the first Saturday of June. And there's more than 1,000 of events all across the country in all 50 states. And about a quarter of those events are stewardship based. So designed to get people out to give back and do trail maintenance or build new trails. And so those are our kind of key programs, and we have a variety of other kind of smaller programs, but that's kind of the 30,000 foot view of what AHS does. And so it's great to have partners like Athletic Brewing that want to give back to the places that so many people love to recreate. So we really do appreciate Athletic Brewing's sponsorship and the work that you guys allow us to do. And we had a lot of awesome plans in mind for 2020 that didn't work out due to COVID and other circumstances. But we're definitely looking forward to getting back out there to host more trips and continue to do the work on the trails, in addition to the continual work that we do through advocacy on the Hill.
As cool as it would have been to do things together this year, we're still happy to just, that's the cherry on top, honestly. The fact that we get to help is, just making non-alcoholic beer, we can help trails. Like, how crazy is that? And that's just because we're helping folks like you do what you do. And we're going to keep doing what we do. So if we're able to do something this year, that's just the cherry on top, man. And just a quick side story. I actually learned about American Hiking Society way back in the day. I was in high school, and I saw an advertisement, not an advertisement, it was on the news about doing the alternative break program. And college students were they were like shoveling snow at the Grand Canyon. And my mind was totally blown because, one, I didn't realize you could do this for spring break, and two, I had no idea that it snowed at the Grand Canyon because I'm from Florida. We don't even know where snow is. We just know it's up north somewhere. And I was like, the Grand Canyon's in the desert. How is it snowing there? And how is there feet of snow? But sure enough, little did I know all this stuff existed. But that was just a quick anecdote. But that's where I learned about American Hiking Society. But yeah, let's jump right into rapid fire.
Sounds great.
Perfect. All right, rapid fire number 1. What is your biggest goal not yet achieved?
I would love to do a thru hike of some kind with my daughter at some point.
How old is she?
She's 3 now, so we have many years to go before we're ready for a thru hike.
So you can plan it. You got time to plan.
Yes, we have time to plan.
That is awesome. Do you have a life motto of any sort or anything you try to keep in the front of your mind on a daily basis?
Not really. Really trying to focus on just loving my family well, I think is key, and kind of everything else kind of needs to work into that somehow. And so, I would love to do a thru hike with my daughter, but if she's not into hiking or whatnot, I'm sure there'll be other ways that we can connect. And that I can make sure that we have awesome experiences together.
Oh, that's awesome. Is there anything you like to do on a daily basis that helps you, stay on task or be the most effective, efficient person you can?
Yeah, getting outside. Being able, like, even if it's just for like 20 or 30 minutes, I realize that, like, the amount of stress and anxiety to normal day life, especially during COVID and whatnot, being able to get outside, even if it's just a walk around the block, really helps me stay stable. If I go too long without getting outside, I just don't perform well at work or do well with my family.
I couldn't agree more. What would you say your proudest achievement is outside of hiking and climbing?
Great question. I don't know if it's related, but I've done a couple of it's not hiking. I mean, it is hiking related, but building a section of the Continental Divide Trail is something that I'm super excited that people will be using that trail for decades and hopefully centuries to come. And I had an impact on that, and so that's something that I'm very proud of.
That is too cool. Maybe we can join American Hiking Society out someday to help finish a trail of some sort. We'll see.
Sounds awesome.
Great. So to wrap this all up, our motto at Athletic Brewing is brew without compromise. And what we've realized is in order to do that, we have to live without compromise. You can't just, it's got to be who you are, not just something you do as a 9 to 5. what is it to you to live without compromise? What does it mean to you?
Great question. I think the biggest part of that is loving people and yourself well. To be able to do that is important in order to live a life that isn't compromised.
Great answer. Well, Wesley, thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you for just the continued support at American Hiking Society. And I'm really looking forward to many projects and things that we'll be able to do together once this world opens up. But in the meantime, I'm glad that nature is getting the attention from y'all and getting a little break from folks. And it's always going to be there. Nature isn't canceled.
Thanks again for having us, and we appreciate all that you guys do for your Two for the Trail program.
First of all, thank you so much for listening. It means the world to us that you choose to listen to the show. If you'd like to help us further, you can leave a review on iTunes, share us with your friends, your family. It goes a long way to grow in the show. You can also support us financially through patreon.com/adventuresportspodcast. Link is in the show notes. And also, if you have an idea of who could be a good guest for the show, we're always looking for people to tell their story about the outdoors or adventure. So if you know someone, please reach out. Email us at info@adventuresportspodcast.com. And until then, get out there and have some fun.
Is QuickBooks slowing your business down? Do you have challenges managing inventory, project profitability, or just getting paid fast enough? Get your business to a better place and graduate to NetSuite today. Stop paying for multiple systems that don't give you the information you need when you need it. Ditch the spreadsheets and all the old software you've outgrown. Now is the time to upgrade to NetSuite by Oracle, the world's #1 cloud business system. NetSuite gives you visibility and control over your financials, HR, inventory, e-commerce, and more. Everything you need, all in one place, instantaneously. Whether you're doing $1 million or hundreds of millions in revenue, save time and money with NetSuite.
Join the over 24,000 companies using NetSuite right now. Let NetSuite show you how they'll benefit your business with a free product tour at netsuite.com/play. Schedule your free product tour right now at netsuite.com/play, netsuite.com/play.